To work for the common good is the greatest creed, said the great humanitarian Albert Schweitzer, talking about public service. And my guest today is a living embodiment of that. I am Mukesh Kapila, and he is Claus Sorensen, and his bio reads like a recipe book for baking the ideal public servant. I put his CV onto the highest modern authority to judge such things, which was an AI platform, and I asked a simple question: what do you think about Klaus Sorensen? And the answer came back: Klaus is a master bureaucrat who dedicated his life to finding perfect organizational solutions to the problems of humanity. So, Klaus, welcome to Fading Causes. Is AI honoring or insulting you by judging you as a master bureaucrat?
I think they actually touch on something that is very true, that I'm not in the front line, I'm not the politician, but I don't know if I'm a master bureaucrat, but I like actually to shape things a little bit from behind. So there's something that this AI has captured. Obviously, my CV doesn't say much about my personality, but we'll probably come to that later.
Right. Clearly, you have enjoyed your life as a person in the background getting things done, I presume. You're an economist by background, actually, and your early career in the Danish Foreign Service was on monetary, financial, and trade related matters. And you told me earlier, when we talked recently in Dubai, that a high point of your career was helping countries in Central and Eastern Europe fulfill the criteria for acceding to the European Union. Why was that significant? And more generally, for the benefit of those who have forgotten, what's the big deal about the European Union project, its historical significance, and its value for Europeans?
Well, it's maybe a banality. In a way, I should start somewhere else. I actually voted against Denmark joining the European Union in 72. I didn't have gain de cause because Denmark decided to join, but I was very skeptical about a uniquely market-based organization without a social solidarity component into that. And I had underestimated the security policy objectives that lay behind the creation of a closer European cooperation. So I have changed my mind, Mukesh, over time. And when we then saw the breakup of the Soviet Union, and the fall down of the Warsaw Pact, it became obvious to me that they could not be left in the limbo. Because you know, as I know, that if you have a power vacuum, it is being filled by something. And I prefer to fill that with the European project in order to bring them in. And by the way, the European Union is not the property of the existing member states. It has a preamble that says we have to allow all the countries to come in that are European. Now, there is some ambiguity as to would that cover the former Soviet Union or Russia, but there is actually a moral obligation to stay open to those that are part of the European continent. But it was for me more an issue of opening our arms, bringing in those people that have been living under a kind of dictatorship for many years, and to make sure that went as smoothly as possible.
So that kind of speaks, I guess, to your psychological inclination towards inclusion. You come from Denmark, which is a very small country, and being part of something bigger is obviously in the national interest of small countries also.
Of course, it is an insurance policy. Denmark is a strange, little insignificant spot. We have always made a lot of wrong choices. We sided with Napoleon during the Napoleonic Wars. We thought we were bigger than Sweden. They beat us up. Germany came. I mean, enough is enough. I mean, you have to find a way to make sure that we can live peacefully together. And when you look at actually the creation of the European Union and its development as a way to anchor Germany more strongly into a project based on democracy and collaboration, that actually, I think, sent, it was not the only reason, but it sent some comforting signals to the Gorbachev world in the Kremlin that actually Germany maybe had become a different animal it had been before. So, this together with the double decision on the nuclear arsenal and so on, many things were playing into that. But you cannot exclude that this peaceful giant there, the European Union, actually made them feel a little bit more relaxed about how they should go about things. But that's just an element.
Well, but nowadays, unfortunately, so many more people are getting somewhat critical about the EU, aren't they? It's true, as you said, the European Union has been successful in curbing the aggressive nationalism of individual states, especially the larger ones, which had led to many wars on the European continent over centuries. But the EU solution appears to be to create an even bigger grouping, a kind of supranationalism, and putting walls around it. Some call it a fortress Europe. And then you repel others and block others coming in. Have you not been there before? You mentioned Napoleon. Napoleon had a go with creating an imperial Europe. The Romans tried it in ancient times with Pax Romana, not to mention Hitler's evil vision of domination. Of course, the EU is not malign in that way, but is there not a suspicion that it's indulging in the same imperial game, empire building with a modern and perhaps xenophobic twist?
I think in every attempt to collaborate across national borders, you have to question yourself, how far does that collaboration go? You need, I mean, in the European Union, the choice was made to go step by step. So you created the market, but in order for that not to, let's say, suddenly go backwards, you actually created a court of justice so that people, instead of fighting it out on the battlefield when they had economic setbacks, they actually had a court of justice, which was accepted, etc. So you have a wish to do this in a very solid way, but step by step. And obviously, seen from the outside, it can look like it's xenophobic, but it is actually a construct that produces results. And it's not a coincidence that people are talking about the Brussels effect, which is that when you talk about sanitary or phytosanitary legislation, Europe is in the lead because we have managed actually to bring together very divergent legislations among rather diverse countries. Okay, admittedly in Europe, but they do that, and this serves as a platform for others. I mean, a lot of the economic models that lay behind the emissions trading scheme came from the United States, but they were unable to implement it because of their governance construct. But we have been able in Europe actually to be in the forefront of the fight against climate change. And as to the xenophobic nature, I mean, the biggest xenophobic instincts that we have had have actually been inside Europe. I mean, the relationships between French and Germans and Danes and Germans, I don't even want to talk about it. It has been dramatic. So yes, there is xenophobic tendencies, but not so much, I would say, towards the outside, although it can be seen like that. And let me give you a few examples. The African, Caribbean, Pacific collaboration was very much a European initiative to give these countries an agency, a capacity to act together, creating a parliamentary assembly to let them sit together and talk among themselves. And then we had a counterpart. The same, Mukesh, with the African Union. It has been a project that has been supported massively, not only by money, I mean, but politically, so that we would create a kind of entity on the African continent, which is not an easy thing, as you know, because you have different religions, you have different history, you have Sahara in the middle, but now they are there and they develop every day. And this gives us a counterpart. So the European Commission can go to the African Union Commission, the parliamentarians work together. This is not xenophobia. This is intelligent governance in the globalized world. And this is what we fear is going backwards. But there has been a lot of wishes to reach out. I can continue. I mean, there are also issues, obviously, the common agricultural policy. And I have been the head of cabinet of the Commissioner for Agriculture. And I have been head of cabinet of the Commissioner for Development. So I can see things from both sides. But the common agricultural policy has been massively reshaped. And I know for having worked there that this old picture of the cap, as it's called, to damage markets in developing countries is simply not true. The level of subsidies that lead to exports and so on has been eliminated, and you do it in a completely different way. So I'm not buying into that. I know that there are perceptions, but if there is a partner that the developing countries can count on, it is actually, in my view, the European Union.
Well, I can see why my AI friend called you a master bureaucrat, and I don't mean that as an insult. I mean that
I talk too much. I'm sorry for
I mean
that.
that in an impressive way. We have had Brexit, and I speak as a dispossessed British citizen, feeling aggrieved about losing my European citizenship. But there's rising disquiet in the EU's eastern periphery with Hungary, Slovakia, and so on. So, what's going wrong? Is the European project imploding because it's really been too good? It's the weight of its own ambitions that is bringing it down now?
I think it is not easy, and I think we need to give these countries time. It is not easy to have a transition and quite a, I would not say violent in a military sense, but politically very violent change of regime where you move from having been in a dictatorship mode for 50 years, and then you have to go out and reinvent accountability and democratic tradition and so on and so forth. In some countries, it has actually moved very well. I mean, Poland. I think we may not like this and that government and so on, but somehow they land on their feet and so on. In Hungary, there has been graft, there has been misuse of funds. Actually, there has also been misuse of European funds in countries like Greece, and you know, because I'm married to a Greek lady, I know that country very well. It's not easy. All of this is not easy. I'm not pretending that. But if there is a malaise, and it's a wider malaise, Mukesh, it is, if we take Europe as such, that the benefits have not been distributed evenly in our countries. So there are some people that have come up out on the top, and the redistribution has not happened with the efficiency that I would have liked to see. So we need better tax policies. Tax policy is actually outside of the remit of the European Union because it lies with member states. So it's not easy to do it through the EU policies. We use regional policies, cohesion funds, etc., to lift up regions. But member states have to be very careful if they leave behind big segments of the population that then become unhappy. And they have to be very careful when they design policies. One example was the yellow vests in France. I mean, for me, I don't I don't get it. Why nobody in Macron's surrounding actually checked what the income distribution effects would be on a tax of gasoline in rural districts in France. I know for a fact that they didn't check it. But when you come with a new tax here and there, you have to think through what are the effects. I don't think it was done out of bad faith, but it created a political backlash that was completely unnecessary, which is now becoming a sort of quasi permanent. My main point is we need to support the so called social contract. So market forces can work, but you need a distributional policy that doesn't leave people behind.
Now, let's look forward a bit, say 50 years from now, and the world is divided into many unions. European Union, of course, is a granddaddy of all. Then we'll have a African Union, we have the Caribbean Union, we have the various forms of Asian unions, and then we have other unions that cut across continents, like the BRICS. A world that is composed not of countries, but of blocks of countries, each of them preserving the block interests. What kind of world is that going to be? Is it going to be a better world or a worse world than now?
Well, I do believe that you already today, if you use the metaphor of blocks, you have some countries that are very big. Let me start with the UN reform. For me, it's a mystery that we have not reformed the Security Council. It's completely absurd that we have the G20 and Brazil is not in the Security Council. India is not there. I mean, what's going on? This is why there is a lack of legitimacy. So that's one reflection. The other reflection is okay, you can just maintain these big countries and they sort it out among themselves. But what about Colombia? What about Senegal? What about others that want a seat at the table? So I think, short of jumping straight ahead, 100 years ahead, I think we have to take it step by steps. I do believe a reform of the UN is absolutely urgent and necessary to be more representative. But I do hope that also small countries, and I speak it a bit like a Dane, we don't find it legitimate that everything is sort of sorted out between the big guys. Why? Am I a second-rate human being? Don't I have a place where I go with my voice? This is why actually being a member of the European Union helps me, because it allows me to recapture part of my sovereignty that I have lost in globalization. This issue of the illusion of sovereignty because you sit on an island, sorry to say, coming back to Brexit, there's no sovereignty in many issues anymore, because we may have an idea, but we cannot implement the real solution on climate, on pandemics, on financial transactions, unless we collaborate.
You make a good point. If you were a small person in a small country, you actually find a bigger voice when you're part of something bigger,
Yes,
like uh, like a bloc in whichever continent.
absolutely, absolutely. And I've seen it. I have seen it, Mukesh. I have been working in the commission. I have taken initiatives inside the organization on many, many different things. Nobody would have listened to me if I had not been inside that building. Nobody. As a Dane, I would have been out of the game. And some Germans would have been there. They would have to sort it out with the French, but that's not the model I would favor. And by the way, they will have a surprise, because then in the implementation, they would realize, oh, wow, there were some other small guys over there, and maybe we have forgotten them. How do we bring them in? No, no, you have to find a model where all these voices are listened to and they have a say. You can discuss how you do it. In the European Union, the protection of the small is actually rather amazing. It's really amazing. This is about voting rights and all of that. And I think that is something that could serve as an example for other parts of the world. But mind you, let's not be overly naive. This takes time. And the very first step, I would say, should be the reform of the Security Council and the functioning of the UN. And I pray every day that what is happening these days is not going to throw the UN out of the window.
I think you were obviously a very good civil servant in Denmark, and it was Denmark's loss when you went to Europe, to Brussels, and there you ascended the mountains of Brussels bureaucracy to become the Director General for Humanitarian Affairs and Crisis Management. So, turning to those matters, can you share two or three highlights of your life there, both successes and challenges of leading the world's biggest humanitarian donor machinery of that time?
First of all, I have to say that humanitarian work is not only the EU, it's a very important collective effort of the European Union and its member states. I mean, we have proud member states that are very active in that field. Germany, United Kingdom, when they were members, and they are still trying to keep it up. The Scandis, the Dutch, and so on and so forth. So it's a collective endeavor. And maybe I should start with a very personal story, which is strangely enough coming from Melbourne. I spent some time down there because we were there to visit families of my wife. You know that there are many Greeks living in Melbourne. And I was sitting in a tram. They have streetcars moving around. And I was sitting with my little booklet from the European Humanitarian Office, ECHO, which has a logo on it. And in the tram, I could see that there was a dark skinned lady that started looking at me. And she was sort of insisting, looking more and more. And suddenly she stood up. She made an effort to come. And she looked at my booklet and she said, are you coming from that organization? And I said, yes. And is this the European Humanitarian Office? I said, yes. You just have to know your organization has saved my life. It just came like that. And I was completely shaken by that. It turned out that the lady had been in Darfur, and you know the refugee camp there. They had been harassed. Her sister had been raped. All kinds of strange stories. And for some reason, she got into contact with our people, and then managed to get a job outside. And then she immigrated there. So it's many specific small efforts, but this one made a big impression on me. There are many other issues. I went to Mogadishu for a feeding station for babies, and I realized something that I would never have thought of, that outside the feeding station, where the mothers of the babies were given plumpy nuts, this highly nutritious food. Their husbands were standing outside and they stole the food. To give you an imagination what kind of world we are living in, I went to Bunch in South Sudan when the former, let's say, unified government in Khartoum pushed people out in the Blue Nile state. And these poor people had fled in the middle of the afternoon. The kids were still in school uniforms. Unfortunately, they had gone towards Ethiopia. They had then closed the border. Then they turned back and they walked 50 miles back into South Sudan, and they had absolutely nothing. And they were coming to the airplane. I was landing in a small airplane and just begging for food and so on. And then I saw something under a tree. It was something, a lady, a person, and it was one of these young ladies, and she gave birth right in front of me, right here. And, we don't have a clue of the human misery that is unfolding. So these are very profound memories that I will carry with me till I die. And there's no way we can give up on that. We have to continue. Maybe one word on international negotiations. It was also very important that at the level of New York, we could collaborate to make sure that the Security Council would accept cross-border deliveries during the Syria crisis, because we could not get food and medicine up from Damascus up towards Aleppo. It had to come from the north. But this, of course, is complicated because you don't respect the sovereignty of a state and so on. So you also need to work politically. And there, Mukesh, I have to say that sometimes our humanitarian, and I love them, I really love them, they are too much ayatollahs. They don't like to dirty their hands with the political work because they want to stay neutral. They don't want to take sides and so on. But you need to do both. You need to feed and save lives, but you also need to work politically. How you balance it is very delicate. I mean, I know yourself, you have been in the middle of that in Darfur, and you know what I'm talking about. But we cannot just sit and being ayatollahs and say we are neutral, we don't want to touch politics. We have to find a clever way to do that, and maybe work. I mean, definitely work across the silos.
My dear Klaus, my dear friend, thank you for joining me in this conversation. And I wish you a very good rest of your life.
Thank you very much, Mukesh, and hope to see you soon. Thank you.